Welcome, I'm Dan Moyane. We are about to be in conversation with the Minister of Finance, Pravin Gordhan, here on eNCA. Welcome as well to our ETV viewers who are joining us here on the terrestrial sister station. Well, we've had the Minister speak yesterday, delivering his much anticipated 2016 budget speech in Parliament. A lot was said before that much anticipated budget speech, and also since yesterday there's been a lot of response, reaction and post-budget analysis. But the Minister is joining us here in Cape Town this morning at a very special post-budget breakfast briefing. We'll start off by talking to the Minister one-on-one to get his views about 18 hours later after he delivered his budget speech. And then later on our program here on Morning News Today on eNCA and of course on our ETV channel, we'll be joining other guests who are at the breakfast this morning to also interact with them, and maybe they can also be raising other issues with the Minister. Thank you for joining us this morning. Minister, welcome. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
I know it's been a long slog for you since yesterday, and you've had an early morning, but we really appreciate you being here this morning.
Thank you.
As I said, a lot was said about the budget speech before it happened. It was kind of much anticipated. It's expected to be the toughest budget for you. Just from your perspective, was it the toughest budget for you?
No, it's a tough budget because we are finding ourselves in a very difficult global economic environment with lots of doubts about whether the developed world will continue to grow. Lots of doubts about Japan as a very big economy, about China and the kind of transition that it is undertaking at the moment, and the increase in interest rates by the United States means that monies have been flowing out quite substantially of emerging market countries or developing countries as we know them, and that begins to affect financial stability. And we've seen that currencies of emerging markets have been affected, commodity producers have been affected. In other words, because of lower demand and lower prices, countries like Brazil, South Africa, Australia, Canada have all been negatively impacted because minerals that we dig up and export are not required in the same kind of quantities that they required in the past. Then we have our own internal difficulties as South Africa. We've been growing too slowly. Our unemployment levels are too high, our poverty and inequality levels are also high, and we don't seem to be able to crack the formula for getting higher levels of growth and investment in our own economy. Government has been, for the last 6 years or so, carrying the substantial burden of investing in, for example, infrastructure. So we've got to come up with new answers, and at the same time, we've borrowed a lot since 2009. In order to be able to sustain particularly our social services and invest in infrastructure and the economy more generally through incentives and so on. Well, we haven't grown at the same level as we've borrowed, which means that we've got to tighten our belts, as everybody says, tax a little bit more without hurting the economy, and cut expenditure within government as well. So that's the balancing act, temporarily, I hope, that we have to perform until all of us can put our heads together and say, how do we grow this economy? How do we get more investment? How do we create more jobs?
Okay. Some people have said that because of the tax relief that you are giving to the lower to the middle income earners in South Africa, you sort of helping the poor. What is your key message then? I mean, you were very clear yesterday to say that we can't spend the money that we don't have. Is that the same message to South African household this morning?
I think our household debt levels were quite high. They were over 85% at one stage. They've now come down below 80%. But indebtedness in South Africa is a serious problem. Unsecured lending at one stage was a serious problem. In other words, lots of people who didn't quite have the ability to pay were being given loans, and we discovered this during the difficulties we had amongst the Marikana communities, where all sorts of cash lenders were getting both themselves and people into difficulty and charging huge interest rates. So yes, the message is we will try to do whatever we can, as we have done this time, where there is possibilities of tax relief. We will direct the tax relief at the lower end. So for example, to mitigate inflation, the money that we've put in, 5.5 billion rands, is going to the lower income brackets. Secondly, be careful over the next year or two Don't overextend yourselves, although consumption is an important part of our economy. But like government, everybody needs to balance their budgets as well until we can really get the economy to start growing, people to earn better amounts of money, and then they can start spending again.
Yeah. One of the issues that has come up, as you said, in terms of balancing things is, as you said yesterday, you've had to reprioritize or redirect some of the spend to other areas that are needing priority now, like education, like the drought situation, the farming community. But one other issue that's still out there, people are wondering about, is the nuclear program that is still to come. In your view, how and when can we afford to spend on that program?
Well, we're at the very early stages of that program, and as the President indicated, we will phase the implementation of a program like that in accordance with our affordability. That's the first thing. But the second thing is the Minister of Energy, I think about 2 days ago, announced that the technical capability to manage just the procurement, let alone the implementation of the program, is something that would lie with what is called the IPP office, which has been very successful in managing huge renewable energy projects. Secondly, we'll have to go through a proper, transparent procurement process. In other words, send out what is called a request for proposal. Anybody who is interested in supplying nuclear power to South Africa or nuclear power stations can put in a bid. That will give us an understanding of what are the different cost levels, what type of technology is available. So it's going to be a year or two or more before we can definitely say how long, how much, and over what period of time we're going to manage this program.
Okay. In terms of state expenditure, some opposition parties and some commentators have been saying you could have afforded maybe to go deeper in terms of cutting. Do you think the measures you put in place now to start saving and pull back the state expenditure will help us going into the future to really start sparing that growth that we all require?
Cutting expenditure doesn't necessarily spur growth. What it does is to make us a lot more cautious about how we spend public money. Secondly, it's a beginning of a process which will be continued for the next budget, where Minister Hadebe's department is actually going to ask tough questions about which programs work, which programs are necessary, which programs need to be tailored down or cut, and which programs need to be promoted. So as we move from this budget to the next budget, those are the next set of tough questions that we will actually be asking. For the purposes of growth, we require more investment, both from government and from the private sector. We need more creative energy from our own people. We need entrepreneurs on a large scale. We don't have them on a large scale. We are a very concentrated economy. So the emphasis on small and medium-sized businesses is very important, and support for them. And this is one of the conversations that we've had with big business in South Africa. How can they support small and medium-sized businesses? How can they give them opportunities and link them to their supply chains and value chains? And if those discussions continue, as they will, we'll see some better results in the days ahead.
One of the suggestions that have been made publicly is the size of the cabinet, for instance, the size of the government, the whole entity. Is this something that concerns you as well?
Well, that's something that's in the hands of the President. So it's best managed where it actually belongs constitutionally.
Okay. Now, finally, just before we finish our conversation at this stage, Minister, in terms of tax collection, you've targeted the wealthy in terms of the properties above, like the capital gains tax. And any idea there from your team how much could be coming into the state coffers?
Not at this. I mean, transfer duty and capital gains tax depends on an event. In other words, it's only if you buy or sell a property that transfer duty needs to be paid. It's only if you sell shares or sell an asset that a capital gains tax event takes place. And then there's a threshold. So if you be below the threshold, capital gains tax doesn't apply. If you're above the threshold, we have what is called an inclusion rate. In other words, if you've benefited by $1 million, for individuals, 40% will be included in your income tax as your income, and then taxed according to the rate at which you are normally taxed. And those inclusion rates have been historically quite low from the time we've started the capital gains tax in South Africa. And even now, it's quite modest compared to the rest of the world. I know some of your listeners might say, but we do not index it to inflation, so let me anticipate that and say that is true, and that's precisely why we've kept those rates at the levels they are.
Okay, Minister, thank you very much for chatting to us now.
Okay.
We'll be joining the Minister later on, and hopefully he'll be joined at the time by his Deputy Minister, Mcebisi, join us as part of a panel as we continue further unpacking the 2016 budget speech that the Minister gave in Parliament yesterday. Now we're going to be taking a break, after which I'm hoping to be joined by economist and analyst Tabi Leoka from Argon Asset Management for her take on what has come out of the Minister's budget speech. Stay with us.
Quickly, guys.
Minister, thank you very much.